TrekProfiles Podcast, episode 37, recorded June 2020. This is the Trek Profiles Podcast, where each episode we sit down with a Star Trek fan. We learn their Star Trek story, and we try to figure out what this fandom is all about. I'm John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 37. If you wish to get in touch with us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter at TrekProfile. Warning! As we record this, we have reached the end of Season 1 of Star Trek Picard, so all previous Trek content up to and including that point is fair game and may be discussed during this episode. You have been warned, human. As always, my trusty sidekick and co-host is the silent yet sagacious, seriously studious, but seldom silly M5 Multitronic Unit. Say hi, M5.
M5, all systems standing by.
All right, let's do the announcements.
Announcements displayed.
The Trek Profiles Podcast is an independent Star Trek podcast. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is to subscribe via your preferred podcasting platform. There are some lightly edited outtakes and bonus material at the end of this episode. They will come after the ending audio cards. Enjoy them or not, as you choose. Let's do some Kobayashi Maru feedback. These are from episode 35 with Allison Pitt. I asked Allison, Borg cube or Borg sphere? I asked her to assimilate this question, and she chose the cube, and on Twitter, so did most of you by an astonishing 89 to 11%. Next question, choose your disruptor brand, Klingon or Romulan. Allison selected the Romulan version, but on Twitter it was also a win for the Romulans by a slight 53 to 47%. Next question, the river Temark in winter or Chenza at court, the court of silence? I hope you were all up on your Temerian for that one. Allison picked Chenza at court and Twitter agreed by 62.5% to 37.5%. If you were stuck inside a Star Trek episode, which could be worse, the Savage Curtain or Code of Honor? Allison said it was a no-brainer and picked Code of Honor, yet Twitter was not as one-sided as it appeared, and 62 to 38% said Code. Last question, Riker's making you dinner. Will you have the bunny corn sausage or the O1 scrambled eggs? My guest had concerns about the venom sacs, but did select the bunny corn sausages, and Twitter agreed by 66 to 34%. And that is that. All right, let's do a little bit of mailbag. This is from my friend Jamie McGregor, that's JMacRef on the Twitter, who asked me where he can get a complete list of my Star Trek Voyager rankings. Now, for those of you who don't know, I have live tweeted my entire watch of Star Trek Voyager, and at the end of each episode, I give it a Spock rating out of 5. Now, if you want to know what my Spock ratings are and sort of what they're all about, I wrote about that on TrekProfiles.com, and I'll put a link to the show notes for that on this episode's page. So when I live tweet an episode, I am really live tweeting it. I'm watching the episode in real time, pausing it every few minutes, composing a tweet, taking a screenshot and all of that, and then I resume the show. It's hot takes all the way down, entirely off the top of my head. The ratings are the same. They are literally my snap decisions in the moment at the end of the episode, so I really never felt the need to memorialize them in a spreadsheet or put them on the site anywhere. My ratings are like my personal opinions, and frankly, I'd not be comfortable posting them anywhere. They're ephemeral, and that's why I only just tweet them. I don't really keep track of them more than that, so I do not keep them. But if you want to follow along with my live tweeting of Enterprise, which I'm doing now, you can follow me on Twitter at TrekProfiles, but do not look for a ranks list because there isn't one. Okay, let's get on with the show. M5, let's roll it.
M5 acknowledges.
Her favorite character is Hoshi Sato with Tasha Yar a second. She really loves Luoxana and Sela too. She's currently watching Star Trek Voyager. She's in Vacation Land, that's the state of Maine in North America Earth in Sector 001. It's Kerry Purvis. Welcome, Kerry, and thanks for being on my podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, John. It's so good to be here.
It is an absolute thrill to get you on the show, but the M5 is a harsh taskmaster, and he demands that I ask you question number one, Kerry, which is, are you a Star Trek fan?
Oh, yeah. I'm very much a fan.
And have you been a fan your whole life? Is it something that you remember discovering at a particular point, or did it come to you later in life?
I've been a fan my whole life. My first memory of Star Trek was when I was 4 or 5. And all I remember was sitting in the kitchen with my parents, and this was in the early 80s, so I don't know why they had a black and white TV set at the time, but they did, and it was on top of the fridge. And all I remember was looking up and seeing Mr. Spock's face. I don't remember what episode it was. I don't remember anything other than his face. And that's always stayed with me, though. And I know I liked the show because when TNG came out a few years later, I ran to my mom because I saw a trailer for it on TV, and I ran to my mom. I'm like, Mom, there's going to be a new show. We have to watch it. So I must have seen the original and liked it because I was so excited. And I remember the day Encounter at Farpoint came out, and my parents and my sister and we just all crammed into the living room and watched it. And I remember loving it and thinking the characters were cool, and seeing the jellyfish-like things at the end was cool. And after that, we watched Star Trek, me and my sister and my mom. My dad wasn't as big of a fan, but we would watch it every Sunday night and eat pizza and drink grape juice. And sometimes my husband and I do that now when we watch certain episodes, but now that we're older, we drink wine instead of grape juice.
It still is grape juice, though, isn't it?
It is. That's true. It is true. Yeah, it's true. And I've seen most of the other series. I watched Deep Space Nine and Voyager. I didn't finish them when I watched them as a teenager. And then I went away to college and I got kind of busy and I stopped watching. And I didn't see Enterprise during the first run, but I've since finished Deep Space Nine. I've watched Enterprise recently, and I'm working on Voyager right now. I just got into season 7, and it's really interesting to learn more about Seven after watching Picard. So there's things I still don't know about her that I think it's going to be interesting connecting the dots.
I just finished watching Voyager as well, and I thought season 7 was very strong. So I think you've got a great season in front of you. And I was in the same boat too, in that I'd seen all of Picard before I'd gone back and watched Voyager, and it affected how I watched some of those episodes. I don't know if you're having the same experience or not.
Yeah, I just watched the one where Icheb gave Seven his cortical node, and it just broke my heart because I know what's coming, and it's so sad, but it was a great episode.
As I've talked about Star Trek with a lot of other fans, it's interesting because I think that how you watch some of those episodes definitely changes based on when you watch them and in what sequence. I mean, there are people who talk about waiting all summer to watch the best of both worlds and to see what happened when it came back. And then there's people who came into it in the streaming world and never had to wait. So for them, it's all like one thing, right? It's just that's it. That's all that there was. Or for those of us who were told that Star Trek was dead for the longest time, right? There's no more Star Trek. There'll never be more Star Trek. That's all there is to it. And then we got the motion picture. And you walk into the movie theater and there's this tremendous score that's playing, and you get these Klingon D7s appearing. And it's hard for someone who didn't have that experience of not having anything and then walking into the theater and sitting down to see that and have that experience. It really, really changes how you interpret what you're watching.
That's so true. I was a little bit younger at the time when it came out in 79, right? I think.
Motion picture? Yeah.
I was born at the end of that year, so I was too small to remember it. But I remember seeing it in high school, and I didn't have that experience of having no Star Trek for a long time. And so I watched it, and I was really hardcore Trekkie then. And I turned it off. Like I was so bored, I turned it off. And that was not normal for me because I wanted to watch all Star Trek. But the part when they were just flying by the Enterprise, and it was just fly by the Enterprise, here's the Enterprise. And I was so bored. I've seen it since and I appreciate it more now. But yeah, my teenage brain just was not having it. And I think I would have felt differently if I had that experience of waiting and then finally seeing more Star Trek. And I did have the best of both worlds experience where I waited all summer to find out if Picard was going to die or not. And I remember actually making up a song, and I don't remember the whole thing, but it was like, Captain, da da da, are you going to die? Something like that. And I, and I would sing it to my dad, and he's like, Kerry, he's not going to die. But yeah, that's my summer.
You never know. They killed off Tasha Yar in the very first season.
They did.
So you never know. They do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
So as we sit here today and record this in 2020, which Star Trek are you missing? We know Voyager season 7. Mm-hmm. Any others?
I haven't finished the original series. Or sorry, no, I have finished the original series. I know I've seen all of it, but I don't remember a lot of it. So I'm due for a rewatch with that. And the animated series, that's what I meant. I haven't seen all of that yet, but I'm really enjoying that. And I've seen all of Discovery, all of Picard. Yeah, I think it's just the animated series and Voyager that I'm a little behind with, but I've seen everything else.
Very good. Very good. When you're choosing to consume Star Trek, it sounds like you watch it with your husband. You made reference to that earlier. Is that how you primarily consume it, or is that just once in a while, or you primarily watch it alone and once in a while with him, or what do you do?
Kind of a mix. I think I watch it more myself, but he will watch with me, and we listen to podcasts together. And Star Trek it's important in his life too. His father died when he was 11, so he wasn't in his life very long, but one of his few strong memories of his dad was sitting on his lap and watching TNG. So when we got married a few years ago, we played the Inner Light Suite in our wedding to honor his dad. So I'm much more of a Trekkie than my husband is, but he appreciates it as well. And we did watch all of Picard together, and he really enjoyed that.
Oh, so you weren't one of those people where like you had to watch it right away. I've talked to a couple Trekkies that are in relationships, and like one of them be like, "Oh man, I really want to watch the episode." It's like I'll watch it, but then I won't tell the other person that I've watched it, and all that because I had to. So there's none of that. You're actually holding out and watching it together.
I think there was one episode where I really felt like I couldn't wait, and I watched it. I told him, but I don't remember what it was, but I know there was one that I watched ahead of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We won't tell. It'll be our secret, Kerry. It's okay. All right. Very good. So when you watch Star Trek, do you watch it on your phone or you put it on a big screen? And what do you do?
Usually big screen. I've watched it on my phone before. Sometimes we have a treadmill in our house and we could get a second TV, but I decided just to get some Velcro and put my tablet on the wall. So I use that to watch Star Trek when I work out.
That's great. Well, Velcro is a space invention that was given to us by the Vulcans. Yes. So therefore, I think that's a very Star Trek related way to do it. I totally approve.
Yeah.
Are you a collector at all?
A little. I like to collect the Blu-rays, and I've started collecting some of the action figures. I like the books. I don't know if that counts as collecting, but I have a lot of the books.
It depends on what you collect them for. It depends on how you get them, because some people, you can get all the books on Kindle, right? And if you just want to read them, that's probably the fastest way to do it. Some people don't like to read on Kindle or read electronically. Some people just prefer a paper experience. But there are some people who want all the books. Like they want to have a complete collection. So I guess that really depends on you. So which is it?
I think it's just more to read. It's not having a complete collection because I've already got too many books and they would take up too much space. Not that that's a bad thing, but definitely. I wouldn't call myself a book collector then. I appreciate the books, but I don't collect them. Really, I think it's just the Blu-rays, and I still need one season of Enterprise, but I really like having the Blu-rays. Or, well, not all of them are out on Blu-ray, right? Because I don't have Voyager yet, and I think that's only DVD.
Yeah, Deep Space Nine and Voyager are not on Blu-ray.
That's such a bummer, especially Deep Space Nine. That would be so cool on Blu-ray.
They're on DVD. You can get those, but not Blu-ray. So my question is, why would you feel the need to buy Blu-rays when everything's on streaming?
The bonus content. Yeah, bonus content. I love seeing the interviews and the gag reel. I love seeing the mistakes they make and the goofy things they do. And that's really my favorite. But yeah, bonus content. Absolutely.
I remembered reading something about Blu-rays and DVD special editions and all that. And they were particularly talking about Steven Spielberg, who famously doesn't do director commentaries. His point of view is like, the film is my commentary. Mm-hmm. I have nothing else to say except for there you go. Right. So he was always very resistant to the idea. And when they first started making all this bonus content back in the day, they thought that those director commentaries would be the thing that people would really want to look for on those DVDs. It turns out that the gag reels was always the much more popular thing.
They're so great.
I
They're
know.
so great. I love
Because
it.
it humanizes the talent in a real sort of way, I think. And it's nice to know that not everybody is as cool, calm, and collected as some of these characters we see on screen.
It's so true. Like, have you seen the ones of Michael Dorn walking into the door?
Oh God,
Yes.
he's walked in a lots of things,
Yep,
but
he
yeah,
did. Yep.
I love it when like the actor can't get a word out like shibboleth or something, or they can't quite pronounce something correctly, and they just take after take. It's amazing.
Yeah, I love it.
Have you ever been to a Star Trek convention?
Yes.
When was that?
Well, actually, it wasn't. Are you talking like specifically Star Trek or a convention that had Star Trek people?
Any kind of fandom convention.
Yes, I have. I went to something called Bangor Comic and Toy Con in 2016, and I met Denise Crosby, and I was in grad school at the time, and I was so busy. It was my last semester, and I found out about the con last minute, and I just decided, you know what? I'm going to pull an all-nighter. I'm going to get this all done because it's Tasha Yar. I'm going to go meet her. And it was so awesome. Actually, can you see the shirt I'm wearing?
It says today is. That's all I see.
Today is a good day to read.
To read. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I wore that to the con, and I was so nervous about meeting her. And my husband said, just go talk to her. It's not a big deal. So I walked up, and she looked at my shirt, and the first thing she said was, I love your shirt. So it was just so easy to talk to her after that, and it was so cool. And we talked about Star Trek, and then we also talked about Pet Sematary, which was filmed in Bangor, which is my hometown. And the cemetery scene is the same cemetery where my grandparents are buried. So that was sort of neat. But
oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really cool though. And then I went to Rhode Island Comic Con a few years ago, and that was an interesting experience. I had bronchitis, so I lost my voice. So it was really hard to talk to people. So it was a little awkward, but I got to talk to Marina. She's amazing. And Brent and Michael Dorn. It was really awesome to meet everyone. Oh, and we talked to Jonathan Frakes too. That was kind of fun to talk to him. And we talked about North and South a little bit. Have you seen that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Civil War miniseries thing.
Yes, yeah. And there's a lot of people on that who have been on Star Trek as guest characters. James Reeder, I think his name is. He played Jonathan Frakes' brother. I know he's going to be on an upcoming Voyager episode. So I'm looking forward to that. But it was fun to talk to him. And his wife used to own a store in Belfast, Maine, I believe. And I asked him about that. And he said she had to close it, which is a bummer. But yeah, they were here for a little while.
So it sounds like you've seen a lot of the TNG talent. Is there any particular actor or behind the scenes personality that you'd like to see at a convention or meet that you haven't had the chance to yet?
I'd like to talk to Michael again. It'd be great to meet a lot of them again, just because I was having a hard time talking to them. But I would like to meet LeVar Burton. I think that would be so wonderful. I grew up watching Reading Rainbow, and he was always the Reading Rainbow guy to me. And then I found out the Reading Rainbow guy was going to be on Star Trek, which just was so awesome. And my favorite Reading Rainbow episode is the one where they're on the Enterprise and behind the scenes, and that's a gag reel of itself. I remember they were, what do you call the thing where they do like the little thing they clap to say action?
The clapper.
The clapper. Okay. Yeah. So they were doing that, and then they dropped it by accident on LeVar Burton, and he freaked out. So yeah, I have such good memories of that. I would love to meet LeVar. That would be so great.
Kerry, do you own a Star Trek costume?
I do. I bought I'm sorry, this is just off the record here. I don't know if you can say this, but I bought one of the original series dresses, like the uniform for women, and I hate it. It's just, I tried it on, and like I can't. It doesn't cover your butt. I don't. Yeah, I'd like to get another uniform, but that's the only one I have. But I got it and just wasn't. Just not a fan. I think they look great.
Not for you.
It's not for me. No. Yeah, Deanna Troi has a nice dress. I wouldn't mind getting that. Or maybe some of the uniforms from from Enterprise. That would be cool. But yeah, that's the only thing I have. And then I have my t-shirts like this one.
So you've never actually worn the costume like out of the house?
No.
Okay.
No.
It's funny because one of the things I think all fans have to realize, all fans, is that it would be impossible for any of us to look as good as they do on TV wearing those costumes. I mean, I remembered an interview with the Discovery people, and they were talking about the fact that they actually had different versions of the costume of the blue uniform for scenes where they're sitting down versus when they're standing up.
Interesting.
Because there's no wrinkles allowed in the uniform. And so if they're filming a scene where they're going to be sitting around a conference table, they have one version of it that is for that, and they have another version for standing up. And they can't sit down and stand up in one particular set of the uniforms. Like they can't actually film getting out of a chair or getting into a chair because it violates the costume. It was some really weird thing like that. I'm going on memory, but that is substantially true. Yeah, they were talking about that. Because the wrinkles are forbidden in space, apparently. So it's a thing.
But the Picard maneuver's okay.
Not a wrinkle, this is the new show.
Yeah.
And besides, that's just, Patrick doing his, acting. He is acting, yes. Which is great, which I love it. Kerry, I understand that you watch Star Trek with your husband occasionally, but I also understand that you used to watch it with your dad every now and then, and you sent me a clip of your dad laughing uproariously at Star Trek. Yes. Please tell me about the context of this and why that was special to you.
The context is that when they remastered TNG and it was on Netflix, my parents were visiting, and I don't remember why, but I was telling my mother about it, and because she appreciates it, and we decided to put Conspiracy on, and I said, "Now, Dad, this might gross you out a little. The guy's head's going to blow up." So it got to that part, and his head blew up, and my dad just started laughing. And he kept laughing, and then at the end, when you see the carcass and the steam rolling out, he just completely lost it. He just laughed so hard, and he wanted to see it again. So now he thinks it's hilarious. So now every time my parents visit, we have to watch. Sometimes we just watch that scene with the exploding head and the hamburger everywhere. But
oh my goodness! Yeah. All right, I'm gonna have to go watch that now. And I that's high comedy in TNG right there, right? Is the exploding head with the serpent coming out of the body, right?
Yes, he likes to joke about how Remick had a bad shrimp dinner and had indigestion.
It's a heck of a case of indigestion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And I have to say too, that episode, it was kind of a pivotal one for me, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I was 8 when I watched it. My sister was 6, and I just remember Reming's head blowing up, and I was like, ew, gross. And my sister and I were going to my mom all indignant, like, we're never watching this again. We hate it. But then the next morning we came downstairs and said, can we watch Star Trek? So I didn't realize it at the time, but the fact that I was this kiddo who did not like gore, but the fact that I forgot about it and was okay with it and wanted to watch it again, like, that was kind of one of the moments that I now realize kind of sealed my my being a fan.
So your indignancy was temporary at best.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, Kerry, I think we should talk about some episodes. Are you down?
Yeah.
All right. Well, as always, the M5 made some recommendations for us to talk about, and we have a combination of episodes and some books, apparently, to talk about. But I want to start by talking about a classic episode that certainly shows up on a lot of people's lists, but I'm interested to find out why it's special to you. And that's the Drumhead from TNG. There's obviously a lot in this episode to recommend it, but I want to hear from you specifically. What is it that appeals to you?
What appeals to me from this episode, what I always remember, is the courtroom scene when Picard quotes, was it Admiral Seti? What was that her name or his? I'm trying to remember the name.
Well, she was an admiral.
She was the admiral, and
right.
The father.
And her father was also an admiral,
the father
I believe.
He was quoting with the first speech censored, and I can't do it by memory, but that just has always stuck with me. And I'm not working in the library field now, but I have a master's in library science, and I've worked in libraries in the past, and the First Amendment and not censoring thoughts is a big thing in libraries. And it just really resonated with me, that speech. And it also made me I like history, and it made me think a little bit about the McCarthy era and the things that were happening then, and just people being rounded up, and with Simon Tarses, with them thinking, oh my gosh, you work with the Romulans because you are part Romulan, and Worf, your dad was a Romulan collaborator, even though we know he wasn't. And people were getting caught up in it. Like Worf, he was saying, no, we have to find enemies and seek them out. And it's very easy to get swept up in that kind of paranoia. So yeah, to me, it's just a fascinating episode with some very interesting viewpoints. And I love what Picard said. And then Worf at the end saying, oh my gosh, I believed her. And Picard said, villains who twirl in mustaches are easy to spot, but the ones who cloak themselves in good deeds are, they're harder to spot, and they can really suck you in. So yeah, I love that episode.
One of the first things I recall us connecting over a long time ago was I had sent you a podcast about an interview with, I believe he was the director of the National Librarians Association or something like that, some organization like that, where he was talking about free speech and free inquiry. And I knew you worked in libraries, and I was like, hey, Kerry, check this out. Tell me what you think about it. Right. And I remember that was the first thing we actually connected over, which was really fun.
I loved that.
Let's talk about one of the Kirsten Beyer Voyager relaunch novels. The novel is called Full Circle. And a little bit of context for those who may not be familiar. The whole idea here is that Kirsten Beyer wrote this series of novels that takes place after Endgame. And feel free to correct me on any of this if I'm wrong, because you've read them all, or at least more than I have for sure. So the point here is that after Voyager comes back from the Delta Quadrant, Starfleet decides, or certain people within Starfleet decide, that it would be a great idea to send the Voyager back to the Delta Quadrant with a little mini armada to perform a whole series of investigations and exploration and all of this. And that's kind of the idea behind Full Circle. Is it the Voyager is going full circle back to where they spent all this time, and the idea is that some of the officers of the Voyager go back with them. Chakotay's in command, and there's all these other ships. There's a whole series of very interesting characters that go along with them that we're introduced to. And I got to say, the one of them that stuck out to me was this counselor, Cambridge, who shows up, and you're sort of getting his perspective from Chakotay, who meets him for the first time, and this guy shows up with scuffed shoes, and his uniform is kind of off kilter, and it looks like he hasn't shaved in a few days. And Chakotay is like, who's this hot mess who walked into my office just now? And this guy introduces himself like, oh, I'm Hugh Cambridge, I'm your new counselor. And Chakotay's like, get out of my office. He wants nothing to do with this guy. And he has this amazing Starfleet record, though. And so he finds it hard to not have him on board. And the novel, I think, has a lot of what I would broadly characterize as JC shipping content. In a very high level.
That's why I read it.
Okay. Well, then let's talk about it.
Not the only reason, but I mean, I love Kirsten Beyer for that.
So when the M5 and I were strategizing about what we should talk about, and we were looking at some of the responses to the questions that we'd asked you, one of the questions I have to put in there is why did this novel bubble to the top? You made reference to JC shipping. Is that a big thing for you? Is that a big part of it, or what's going on?
Yep. Are you going to be talking about resolutions at all? Is that one of the things that was loaded by?
We can talk about it now if you want, sure. as part of this.
Yeah. So I didn't even know that shipping, I didn't know that was even a word until a few years ago when I read some book about girl geeks and all the different terms, and shipping was one of them. But I'm like, oh, I do that. JC, I do that. But I was 16 when I first watched that. I was a sophomore in high school, and I was just nerdy, and I didn't connect with any of the boys at my high school. None of them liked me, and I was just depressed. And I remember watching that episode, and that was one of those relationships that I think for me anyway, I could just feel it just seeing them. And I was so upset that they didn't get together that I punched the wall after it was done. My mom was like, what is the matter with you? She just totally didn't get it. But yeah, I am a total JC shipper, and I haven't finished the series. like I've mentioned, but I know what happens at the end, and I was not pleased about that with Chakotay and Seven. But I'm trying to keep an open mind. You know, for a long time, I've thought, oh, they're going to be terrible together, but I haven't seen the last episode, so maybe it won't be as bad as I think. But yeah,
maybe it'll turn around for you.
Probably not, but I'm keeping an open mind.
I'm not trying to put ourselves into the minds of the people who made the show, but I'm asking you to speculate from your own perspective. Do you think it would have been too big of a risk for them to actually have consummated the relationship on the show? I
think it would have been a risk, yes. Yes, I think that, well, just with the command structure alone, I think that would have been a risk. And Kate Mulgrew there was some convention, I think maybe it was Dragon Con one year, and she talked about the relationship with the two of them. And I think having a female captain, I think there's a different standard for her romantic life than there would be for Kirk or for Picard. I mean, Kirk, he always had like the woman of the week and nobody blinked. You know, he was a stud and that was okay. But Janeway, I don't think that would have flown. And for her to be involved with her first officer, I don't think that would have really flown either. Not that I didn't want to see it. I wanted to see it, but I don't think it would have worked. And I think the nice thing about the books is that it's a setting where I think it works. It's less of a risk. And it's not that Star Trek doesn't take risks, you know, and especially with relationships like, I mean, Worf and Troy, that was different. I like them together though, but you know, I mean, there are, I can't think of others, but yeah, I think
Tom and B'Elanna.
Yeah, that was. Do you think that they work together?
No. I just let's put it this way. I just had no interest in it. That's not to say I didn't find certain ships fun and entertaining to think about or to see on screen, but that one just held no interest for me. And as I was rewatching it, every time that some scene would come up with Tom and B'Elanna, I would send out tweets with like sleeping emoticons, you know, like wake me when this is over. Yeah. So it just wasn't for me. But if other people like it, it's okay. But it just was not my thing for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I understand. But yeah, I do think I don't think it would have really worked, even though I would have liked to have seen it. So it was nice to see it in the books. I like that. And I heard an interview with Kirsten Beyer where she talked about how she brought them together because she just thought it was, I don't want to misquote her, but it just the two of them, the relationship they had on the show, it just made sense for them to be brought together. Yeah, and like I said, I don't want to misquote her, but I believe it was something along those lines.
Do you believe that in canonical Star Trek they actually got together?
Yes. My husband and I were talking about this the other day, and I asked him, I'm like, do you think that, you know, on Resolutions, do you think they maybe? And he said, oh yeah.
The one thing I'll say about the book that, and this is more of a literary choice, I think, for Ms. Beyer, is that there's a lot of content in Full Circle, especially where it's in Chakotay's head.
Yes.
And it's him thinking about Janeway, and you're privy to his thoughts on it. And there's just long stretches of paragraphs that are sort of in Chakotay's head. And, you know, I thought, wow, you know, it was something where I was thinking, to some people, they might really like this. It wasn't hitting it for me. I wasn't into that so much. I kind of wanted to see what happened. You know, did they go back to the Delta Quadrant? And, you know, I wanted to get to that. But man, oh man, if you're listening to this out there, folks, and you really want like a deep dive into what Chakotay thought about Janeway and sort of what his hopes and dreams and fears were about that relationship, this is the book for you.
Yes, absolutely. Although now that we're talking, this hasn't really crossed my mind, but you don't really hear a lot of what Janeway thinks. It would be...
No, there's not a lot. There's a little bit in the book, but it is very much from Chakotay's point of view. Mm.
Yeah, and I feel like on the show, for me anyway, like it was pretty obvious that Chakotay was into her, and she was a little more reserved about it. And I think she shared his feelings, but she was a little more guarded, or it just wasn't written in a way where you really see her perspective. And there's a later book where you see more of her perspective, but it would have been nice to kind of hear more about in these earlier parts of the novels, how she felt.
Well, then let's stay with it, because a large part of this, and I read both the books you recommended back to back, so I get them kind of confused here. So maybe you can draw the line, but there's a lot of this. A lot of the story revolves around whether or not Chakotay should retain command of the Voyager. And this weird counselor guy, which, by the way, I found out is actually supposed to be a reference to the actor Hugh Laurie.
Yes, I was going to
House.
mention that. Yep.
Yeah, and so which I have not seen, but I understand that that's a reference there. So make of that what you will. But the whole idea is that he's examining Chakotay as to whether or not Chakotay is in a sufficiently good headspace to command this expedition. That's kind of what the whole point of it is in a lot of ways. There's a lot of drama in the book about that. And so then we move into Architects of Infinity, which is several novels away. I understand there's several that intervene. Is that right?
Yeah. Full Circle is the first one, and the last one published was Architects of Infinity.
And there's some in between, right? Some number in between.
I don't remember how many, but there's a number.
Yeah, and I didn't read all those. So I just read Full Circle and I read Architects of Infinity because that's what came up as we did our analysis for this particular episode. And my goodness, does that book end on a cliffhanger?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Such a cliffhanger. And I'm so frustrated because, the best of both worlds, that was what, 3-4 months? This is 2 years we've been waiting to find out what happens to the Galen or Galen. I don't know how you pronounce it.
Galen, yeah, I believe,
yeah.
Which is one of the ships in the little fleet that they send back to the Delta Quadrant, for those who haven't read it. So we find out that the Galen's destroyed, a bunch of characters are apparently dead, and that's it.
Yeah.
And we don't know anything about what happened.
Yeah, 2 years I've had to wait for this. And I think it's finally, I pre-ordered it. I think it's either coming out later this year or maybe next year, but it's not soon enough. I want to know what happened.
So it is coming.
It is coming.
There is something that's coming.
It is coming.
Okay.
I think there are rumors, though, that it might be the last or one of the last books of the series, which bums me out. But I know Kirsten Beyer is busy with Picard and with Discovery. So I guess I can understand why, but it's kind of a bummer.
Well, we also know, too, that they're making decisions in Picard as to what's happening in the 24th, almost 25th century that's very much affecting sort of what the universe was that she had envisioned for what happens after Voyager, right? So it's sort of like, do you want to spend time writing these books, which very clearly are contradicted by some things that we've seen on screen? And, I can... Yeah, so I can almost see like it would sort of be very frustrating to be corralled into these guardrails about what you're allowed to write about now that they're actually making a show about it, right? Because when she first started these, there was none of this stuff. So she was probably much freer to theorize about what might happen after Voyager came back from the Delta Quadrant. But Picard's taken a lot of that off the table, I think.
Yes.
All right. Let's talk about yesterday's Enterprise, TNG. Here we have the return of Denise Crosby. And we have Rachel Garrett's wonderful performance as the captain of the Enterprise C. We have a time travel story. We have sort of a little bit of a suspense episode here. What about this episode was special to you, Kerry?
The thing that was special to me was this was when I was in 4th grade, and that was one of the worst years of my life. I didn't fit in. I didn't have friends, or very few. It just was not a good time for me. And one of the only good things I remember from that time is season 3 of TNG. And I loved Tasha Yar so much. I don't know why, but when I watched the first season, I just gravitated right towards her. I loved her. And I was so sad when she died. And to see her again was just so exciting to me. I was so glad she was back, even if it was just for one episode. And the writers, I think a lot of people agree on this. They really did not do the character justice in the first season. She just didn't get the time or the dialogue that would have really made her character a more fully formed character. And I think in this one small episode, you get to see what she could have been if she'd been written better. And just seeing her come back, that was so great. And seeing her be one of the main focuses of the episode. And yeah, I think for me, it was just seeing the return of her when I was younger, seeing the return of her during a time when I was not having a great time. But even now I love watching it and seeing her. And it's so emotional for Picard to make that choice to send the Enterprise C back and to trust Guinan was a risk, I think, because he she didn't have any way to prove it to him that their timeline had been altered. So there's that whole moral, philosophical, if we send them back, they're going to die, but all these people have already died. So people are going to die no matter what. And what do you do? What choice do you make? So, yeah, I guess maybe it's a Kobayashi Maru of sorts. But yeah.
Well, there's a lot of episodes that sort of have that examine this in Star Trek, right? Like another one that's on the list is Past Tense from Deep Space Nine. We see a very similar kind of situation, right? Where we're put back in time. We now have a moral conundrum about how will the timeline be affected. And so we have a situation where we have to figure out where to go and what to do from here.
Yeah, that's very true. I like episodes like that where you get to go back in time or go to like a parallel universe and see how things might have turned out differently if you'd made a different choice, or if the Enterprise hadn't gone and helped the Klingons at was it Narendra 5? I can't remember the name of the planet.
Right.
So you really, I think that's very fascinating to see what could have happened if you'd made a certain choice. So I think that's part of the reason I'm drawn to this episode too. It's one of those episodes and it's got one of my favorite characters of all time. So win-win.
One of the most charming episodes of all of Star Trek, in my opinion, and one that I recommend to anybody, even if they don't necessarily care about Star Trek, but just would say, give me a list of episodes I can watch to sort of get the flavor of it. One that I always recommend is Carbon Creek from Enterprise.
I love that one so much.
I know, me too. I love Lucci's on. I gotta go. Why is this one on your list? Why do you love it so much?
Just the same reason. The first time I watched it, it's just a feel-good episode. It's just a sweet feel-good. I love the story. And the first time I watched it, I got to the end and I wanted to watch it again. Like, I liked it that much. And it was fun to see T'Pol kind of joking around with Trip and Archer too, where they're like, "Oh, whatever, you're just pulling our leg," and she wasn't. That was pretty great. The characters were great. Mestral, I really liked him. He was the I Love Lucy, just so iconic. And the fact that he wanted to stay there and get to know the humans more. Oh, and the boy who was going to go off to college and then he didn't have the money, and the Velcro, and just such a feel-good episode. And I do think that's something, it's a good episode to introduce people who aren't familiar with the show. There's some episodes I don't think I would show people just because maybe, you're coming in the middle of a storyline, or maybe if they're not a sci-fi fan, it might be a little too out there for them. But I think there's just something for people who aren't fans in this. It's got a very nostalgic feel to it too. So that's a big reason.
Certainly it does. Yeah, certainly it does. It's glorious. And I'm doing an Enterprise sort of watch through right now, and I'm early in season 1. And I got to say, every time the Vulcans are on screen, including T'Pol, it's just insufferable. It's so horrible. Sort of this jerky attitude. I just watched whichever episode it was where they invite this Vulcan captain over for dinner on the Enterprise, and he's like, "I've just eaten," and he shows up for dinner having just eaten, and he's like, "Would you like some ice?" And he's like, "I only drink water," and like everything out of his mouth is sarcastic and rude and awful. And I just can we get to the cool Vulcans again, please? Yes. Can we please get to that?
Yes. Yeah, I had a similar feeling, although like in retrospect, I sort of appreciate it. It's interesting to see how their society, that was kind of the beginning that we see for Vulcans, and they started out as not being very nice. And then they evolved more, and they came to be a more peaceful race based. They say they're more logical in these earlier seasons of Enterprise. I don't think I see it so much, but it's cool to see the evolution of their species and how they grow. And we don't get to see that with humans. We just hear, okay, well, there's no hunger or poverty anymore in the 23rd and 24th century. And there's no explanation as to how we get there, which I guess it makes sense because we don't really know now how we could get there. But like on Deep Space Nine with the Ferengi, where they are starting to make changes and make progress, we don't maybe in the novels, but we don't get to see where that goes. So I like that we get to see more of that story arc with the Vulcans, even though if you'd watched it during the original airing, it would have been out of order. But that's one way I look at it when I watch those earlier episodes, and the Vulcans are really irritating me.
So you really seem to have an interest in these time travel type episodes, Kerry, because I'm looking at the list here, and one of the ones that jumps out at me is 1159 from Voyager, where we have Janeway in sort of a historical perspective here. So tell me what about this particular one was special to you?
I find genealogy to be interesting. The last job I had, I worked in special collections at a library, and a big thing I did was process requests for people looking for obituaries or just information on their family members. And this episode was cool. The part when Neelix is talking to Seven and she's trying to find some of her ancestors and getting irritated. And he said, okay, you need to expand your search. And I don't remember if he said genealogy or research, just research, but you need to, it's like fishing and you need to cast a wide net. And they did that, and they found information about her great-grandmother, someone, in a Ferengi database. And that's what you find a lot with genealogy. You just find information in these random places. And if you just look on Ancestry, you might not find things, and you have to get creative and look other places too. So I saw that. I'm like, I do that at work. That's so cool.
So tell me about parallels from TNG.
I really do have a theme going here, don't I? Because that's...
You do.
I do have a theme going here.
That is what we do here on Trek Profiles, Kerry. We carefully analyze these ones that you've selected and look for themes, and I think we found one here. So tell me what's going on with this particular episode and why it was that it came to the top for you.
Similar reason for a lot of the other ones, just seeing the different timelines with Worf and things that could have happened, decisions you make. I thought it was really... I guess moving, or it was very interesting to see when Riker was captain and they went to the ready room and he had his trombone there, and I don't think Livingston was there. There was no fish. And he was saying Captain Picard died, and just seeing, because that was a really pivotal moment, the best of both worlds. And that was, if Picard had died, that would have really changed the whole show. So it was kind of interesting to kind of have a glimpse at what that might have looked like. So yeah, just things like that. And then Data with the blue eyes, that was really cool. And oh my gosh, I just listened to, I guess you could say, during the COVID time, I'm doing air quotes. I went to, I don't even remember what organization did it, but it was an interview with Marina and Brent, and they were talking about funny moments. And they talked about when they went into... It's so funny. They went into sick bay and Geordi is lying there, and you can see him and he's very obviously dead. And they're saying, "Where's Geordi?" And Dr. Ogawa says, "He's dead." And he's right there. Right when you can see him. Yeah, that was hilarious. But yeah, I love what could have been. I think that's something I think about a lot. Like, if I'd made this choice, what would have happened? And then on shows too, if this character had made that choice or if that person had died. I was bummed out that Tasha Yar was not there. I guess they had thought about having her there, but that was very close to All Good Things. And they thought, oh, well, we're going to see her again anyway. Let's just have Will Wheaton, which was cool. I think Will Wheaton's great, but I wanted to see my Tasha. So that was kind of sad.
One of the things I appreciate about Parallels is that in a way it's kind of a fish out of water story, because we have Worf, who's like sort of the non-science type guy, stuck in this science story where he's having time anomalies, and you think that'd be more of like a Data or possibly a Geordi thing, that that's the character that would happen to. But here you have this guy who's like this, warrior muscle type, and he's the one that's stuck in the middle of the weird science time anomaly, which I thought was just a great choice, because I think it really made the episode a lot better in that way, that it was Worf that this was happening to, and not Picard or Geordi or Data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, I think it was very interesting. I think the others would have, and I think they all kind of had their own episodes like that in a way, because Riker had the one where with the transporter accident where there was Thomas Riker.
Mm-hmm.
And Picard had when did
All Good Things.
Well, in Tapestry.
Tapestry,
yeah.
Yep.
And I'm sure Data must have had something. I can't remember. But so I think that was kind of explored with the other ones too already. But they really went into it with this episode. And yeah, it's interesting that they chose Worf because science isn't really his area. So yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but good point.
So you brought up Data. Let's talk more about Data. Let's do Data's Day, also a TNG episode and one that was on your list. You love it so much. Tell me why you love it.
I love it so. It's so fun. It's just got a great story, and it's Bruce Maddox. R.I.P. Bruce Maddox. That's
do you feel like your interpretation of this episode changes now that you know what happened to Bruce?
Yes. Oh, I hear him, Data's letter to him, and now it's a bummer to hear that because we know what's going to happen. But it's really neat hearing kind of Data's thoughts because he's an android, and he's got this quest to be more human, and to hear his thoughts for a whole episode it's really fascinating. I think it's cool to hear it from his perspective, and like gosh, there's so much. The dancing, like that's iconic. Gates McFadden dancing with Data, and the Romulan pretending to be a Vulcan. That was so cool. And him thinking like, oh, she's, Vulcans don't lie. So I guess I don't need to report this request to the captain. And then the wedding with Keiko and Miles and his, I like episodes that are funny as well. And I found so much of this episode to be funny. Like when Geordi was getting a haircut and Geordi said, Data, are you here for a haircut? And Data he tries to be funny and he's like, my hair does not grow, you lunkhead. Like Data's failure at humor. I love it. It's so funny. When he went to talk to Dr. Crusher and he talked about the, the untamed ornithoid. It's funny, it's charming, it's got a great story, and there's a mystery to it, but it's not an edge of your seat, which I do enjoy those, but it's like a cozy mystery. Have you heard of those before? Do you know what that is?
Oh, tell me.
Cozy mysteries. So it's a genre of mystery books where some mysteries are just very gory or very scary, and cozy mysteries, they still have things like murder and stuff, but it's what it sounds like. They're just more cozy. They're not as scary.
Like Murder, She Wrote?
Yes, like that.
All right, for the very old Angela Lansbury show. I'm not sure many of the youngs will get that reference, but that's sort of what came to my mind.
Yes, like that. And that's Data's Day is very much like that, I think.
Very good. Very good. Well, I was pleased to see an animated series episode on the list. Here we have The Lorelei Signal. And this is the episode where all the men on the ship are incapacitated by these aliens. And Uhura takes command of the Enterprise in a totally badass move. Mm-hmm. And the women come to the rescue and save all the men from the nefarious aliens. Certainly a great moment in the show, in my opinion, but I'm curious as to your take on it. What
you just said, Uhura's badass moment. She was another character who in the original series, well, in any series really, she was one of the characters who was really underdeveloped, didn't get a lot of dialogue. And I found it so interesting the way she took command, because a lot of episodes you see with characters who are not normally in command roles, the episode is about how nervous they are to take command. They're very nervous and they're very tentative, and it's a big deal. But in this one, she just was like, nope, I'm taking command. She just takes command. There's no nervousness. It's just nervousness. It's very natural. I love that so much. And, the men being, what I thought some of the rest of the storyline was a little silly, but I just loved seeing that. And I'm like, oh, why couldn't we have had more of this on TOS? But I'm glad she got to have her moment there. It was so amazing. I love it. Badass Uhura is the best.
Oh, she was definitely ran it like a queen in that one for sure. A big fan of that episode, and it's probably one of the top 3, I would say, episodes of animated series in my opinion for sure. One that I would recommend to anybody. All right, let's do another. Let's get away from sort of TNG and classic Trek. Let's talk about Enterprise. The episode Horizon, where Travis Mayweather gets to sort of revisit his past. We were talking about genealogy earlier. Well, here's certainly a little bit of a family episode from our space cargo hauler, the Mayweather family on board their ship, the Horizon. What about this episode draws you to it?
You know, it's funny as we're talking, I'm realizing I have another theme. I really like it when the underdog characters get to have their moment. Mm-hmm. That's a big one for me. And this is absolutely that. And this is the last Travis-centered episode we see. And just such a bummer. He was an amazing character too. And also a lot of missed opportunity there. But I loved seeing the vulnerable side of him, losing his father, and then going back to the Horizon and the relationship with his brother. And I liked seeing interpersonal relationships in stories and on Star Trek, just the way people interact with each other, especially friends and romantic partners too. In this case, it was his brother, but just seeing the dynamics there, I find that really fascinating. And that was an interesting story. And also I liked the B plot where they were trying to get T'Pol to go to the movies. And I thought Trip was kind of a jerk when he was telling her like, oh, you want to start a book club, be my guest. And I heard that. I'm like, I'll go. I love that. I'll go to T'Pol's book club. I've actually done, I've done a piece on Women at Warp's blog, T'Pol's book club. I don't know if you've read I've done 2 different pieces so far, but the first one I discussed Frankenstein in Star Trek, which, kind of a shout out to this episode. But yeah,
we will definitely put links up to both of those on the show notes page for this episode of Trek Profiles for sure.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. It's, I'm more of an introvert, so it also kind of annoyed me that Trip was like, oh, you must go to this movie, when I'm more of a person who, like, I don't want to go to the party. I want to stay home and read my book. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I was a little annoyed by that. But it was worth it to see her finally go to the movie at the end. And I loved it when I think it was Phlox and Archer were talking, and she turns around and just says, like, tells them to shut up, basically. Just, it was so awesome. Yeah, I really, really loved that. To me, that's classic. That's one of my favorite, the T'Pol and Frankenstein in books and movies and just all of that. I love that so much.
In my rewatch of season 1 of Enterprise, it certainly seems they have quite an irksome relationship set up between T'Pol and Trip, where they're just sort of, firing phasers at each other repeatedly over whatever issue, all right, and being sort of snarky with each other. And the funny part is that, just the way T'Pol acts, it's very clear that all this, Vulcan stoicism, it's all nonsense. They're as emotional as anybody else, and it's obviously emotional. It's just that they don't really play it up. Mm-hmm. It's just that it's a fiction that they sort of tell themselves and other people believe in a lot of ways.
Yes, exactly. And I think you definitely see that with all Vulcans. So potentially controversial opinion, but I think Tuvok is the best Vulcan of all of the Vulcan characters. And even he, and it seems like with a lot of the lead Vulcans, one of the themes with them is their struggle to, for lack of a better word, master their emotions. That's always a big theme. And even with Tuvok, who I think, is the most Vulcan of the Vulcans, he struggles with that. So, yeah. One
of the things I wonder about, too, because I agree with you exactly in your analysis, and one of the things I wonder about as I ponder that is that it must be harder for the Vulcans that we see a lot of, because they're the ones that are always dealing with humans. Mm-hmm. If you're a Vulcan living on Vulcan, doing Vulcan things all the time, I imagine it has to be a lot easier to sort of manage that emotional state. But if you're in a situation like Spock or T'Pol or Tuvok, we are surrounded by crazy humans, crazy aliens who don't have the strictures of Vulcan society around you. It has to amp up that struggle in a lot of ways. And those are the Vulcans that we see in the show a lot of. Yes. And so I think it really brings that to the fore, sort of the struggle to live that way when there's no real support structure around you to encourage it.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Kerry, you made a statement earlier that you're an introvert, but yet you reached out to me to come be on Trek Profiles. You've written several things for Women at Warp. We've been on other podcasts together. You've been on other podcasts. You've certainly put yourself out there quite a bit because of Star Trek. And I suppose the question I want to ask is, why does Star Trek encourage you to go out and share and to put yourself out like this?
Well, I will say that with social media, I think other introverts might agree with me on this, but it's a much more comfortable way, I find, to socialize. So in a way, I think I'm sort of a social media extrovert, but an introvert, like when it comes to interacting with people in real life. While we're recording this, it's during the COVID-19 outbreak. And I know a lot of people who've been having a really hard time having to be home, but it really hasn't bothered me all that much. The reason I am home, it's, with what's going on in the world, that's not, that affects even me as an introvert. I definitely feel that, but the social interaction piece, I'm good. But yeah, Star Trek is something I've always loved. And growing up, I didn't have friends who liked it as much as I do. I had some friends who kind of liked it, but a lot of my friends, I'd want to watch it and they'd just say, no, I don't like that. Sorry. So in a way, I mean, this is kind of an outlet to finally get to talk to people who love it as much as I do. And yeah, there's the social media, an environment where I'm more comfortable communicating. Podcasts can be a little harder sometimes. Just it feels more like in person and communication than it is with social media. But I've been enjoying those too. Initially, when I first started doing them, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? But yeah, they're fun. It's just a chance to talk to people who love something as much as I do. And I think being an introvert, it doesn't mean that you just stay home all day and, don't talk to people. But, I think for me, when I do interact with people, if it's about something I'm excited about, then I'm much more comfortable, and I'm very excited about Star Trek. So I'm happy to get out there and talk to people. It's fun.
Kerry, you made a reference that Star Trek excites you. What about Star Trek excites you? Why do you love it so much?
There's a number of reasons it excites me. I find it to be, I like things that make you think. And Star Trek, I mean, it makes you think. And it does it in a way that I like sometimes hearing stories that are put in a context that are outside of the world we know. I've also recently started reading romance a little bit, and I enjoy reading romance novels that tackle complex issues in the world today or in the past. And with those ones, there's going to be a happy ending. Star Trek's not always like that, but I find it to be an interesting way to explore these issues that, since they're not in the context of our world, it's interesting to see them in another perspective and another type of storyline. It can kind of take you out of what we're looking at now and make you think about it in a way you might not have. I don't know if that makes sense, but
oh, it absolutely makes sense. I mean, I made reference earlier to the fact that I'm watching Enterprise Season 1. And in one of the episodes, I don't remember which one it was, but it's an early Season 1 episode, Ensign Cutler seems to be making a move to Dr. Phlox. And you have to think about putting yourself in the scenario of the show, in the setting that they've created for us. If you're in one race and you're going to make a move towards an alien that has a completely different set of rules about how relationships work, how mating and sex and everything would work. I mean, it's a completely separate, completely unknown thing. What would this even mean? And it really is a big question. I don't know if they're actually going to get into what that would be like, especially because of what we know from the Denobulans. They have a really different way of operating interpersonally and their family structures. It's completely different from, I think, what we would normally consider traditional here on Earth. And so that's a really interesting question, and I hope that we get to tackle that at some point in the show. I don't remember right now off the top of my head if Enterprise dives deeply into that, but I think it's something which would be very fun to actually talk about. And I think that there's a lot in Trek that could be mined there that would be very interesting.
Yeah, I agree totally. Yeah, that's just one reason I like it. Also, I mean, I find it entertaining. I like to be entertained with my television as well, and Data's Day is just one example of, it makes you think, but also it's fun to watch. That's also great. And there's the nostalgic element, just watching it growing up. That was really cool. I think those are just some of the reasons that I really enjoy it. And I think for the most part, there's, like any, no show is perfect. There are some badly written episodes in every show, I think. But for the most part, I think Star Trek does a very good job of how it writes its episodes, how the episodes are written.
Well, I've enjoyed talking with you, Kerry, but I have to tell you that the M5 is signaling me that it is now time for the Kobayashi Maru. The Kobayashi Maru is a challenging and difficult test, cunningly prepared by the M5. Should you not only survive the test, but pass it as well, the M5 will award you an honorary Star Trek title. Are you ready, Kerry?
I'm ready.
M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulator and prepare to record Kerry's responses.
Simulator ready.
Choose your tribble, tiger stripe, leopard spotted, or classic solid.
Tiger stripe, like my cat.
Omega Continuum or Q Continuum?
Q Continuum.
Take a vacation on the moons of Andoria in the fall or Tellar Prime in the spring?
Oh, moons of Andoria in the fall.
Have a big ol' slice of cellular peptide cake with mint frosting or ride the train to Vertiform City?
Oh, gotta go with the cake.
You've just graduated from Starfleet Academy. You've been offered 2 options for your first assignment. Cardassian Border Patrol with Captain Maxwell on board the USS Phoenix, or science experiments on board the USS Pegasus with Admiral Pressman. What's your pick?
Oh, that's a good one. I'd go with the Pegasus with Admiral Pressman.
Simulation complete. M5, please compute the results and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru.
Analyzing results.
I think that question 5 there about Starfleet Academy, that's kind of what I'm going for with the Kobayashi Maru, yes. Right? It's like 2 equally terrible choices.
Yes.
What was your thought process there on picking Pressman with the science experiments?
Well, the Border Patrol just sounds awful, and I think I like Maxwell better than Pressman. I think it was just the job, but also, I love the episode Parallels. Not Parallels, sorry. Pegasus, too many P's. I love the episode Pegasus. And, I could just have joined Riker's, Riker didn't. He wasn't part of the...
No, he was the part of the Loyalist brigades.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You would not be joining Riker.
Not.
You would be opposing
You're
Riker.
Right. Oh, yeah. Oh, well. Well, I guess I'd be stuck in the rock then.
Well, I will say this. Never forget, Captain Maxwell was right.
Mm-hmm.
Captain Maxwell was right. Kerry, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has determined that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And now, the M5, who has analyzed your answers, will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our podcast. M5, what title shall we award our guest?
Kerry Purvis is awarded the title of Curator of Historical Fiction at the Federation Library on Memory Alpha.
So there you go.
That's amazing. Yay.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Kerry, please tell people how they can get in touch with you.
You can reach me on Twitter. I have 2 accounts. I have one, it's the one I use more. It's Kerberlib. It's Kerrberlib. And si usted habla español, if you speak Spanish, I have a Spanish language one. It's Kerry Trek or Kerry Trek. It's Karitrek. And that's on Twitter too.
Wonderful. Kerry, thank you so much for being part of Trek Profiles.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Here ends this installment of the Trek Profiles podcast. And before we offer a Trek quote to close this episode, I'd like to remind you that you may send us your kind and useful feedback, your angry diatribes about Captain Jellicoe, or your very own recipes for cellular peptide cake with mint frosting to feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter @TrekProfiles. Anything you send me can be used in the show, or it may be stranded for medical quarantine on the Resolutions planet. This week, I leave you with a quote from Mistral, who in the episode Carbon Creek said, quote, "I need to go now. I Love Lucy is on tonight." Close quote. Thanks for listening, and live long and prosper.
This handcrafted podcast is brought to you by Stars and Sky Media Lab. It's cosmic.
I'm reading over some Goodreads reviews of Architects of Infinity, and I finally found one where someone talks about the abortion debate.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Before we start, I have to ask, where do you fall on that? Like, what are your opinions? Just out of curiosity.
My opinion is that it's incredibly complicated.
Yes, mine too. Yeah.
I feel like it's actually funny. I feel like we should save it for the show, but I felt like it was really interesting in that the book was presenting a moral conundrum, which I feel is very classic Trek. Mm-hmm. And it's always better when it's not neat. I find it more interesting that way. You know, when people put forth sometimes in a lot of entertainment like these moral choices, and then you poll people and it's like 80% versus 20 on what way it should go, then it probably wasn't really very good. Right. I feel that same way about these Kobayashi Maru questions that we do on the show here, that like no matter how I feel when I write the question, when the poll results come back, if it's like 80-20, I feel like, oh, that probably wasn't a good question, even if it was very entertaining. I always kind of want it to be 50-50, you know, and the closer it is to that, the better it is. He said, I want my episodes to cause bar fights, not consensus. and that's kind of the, that always stuck with me, is like, that's what you want to get to, right?
Bar fights.
And so
yes.
Yeah, bar fights, not consensus. I mean, he was being glib, but I understood his point, you know, and I think that that's kind of what you want to get to. And so that's what I think that story was, that you got, you know, Harry Kim, who's sort of hapless in a lot of Star Trek, right? He's sort of like this guy that everything happens to and you kind of feel bad for.
Yes, exactly. I'm just turning my phone off. Yeah.
Yeah. And here he gets put into this crazy situation where, you know, I mean, I didn't read all the intervening books, right? I only read the two that you recommended. So there might have been more story there than I was privy to. But this woman that I don't feel he was all that close to in a lot of ways. I don't know. I felt like it was a little bit more of a casual relationship. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
I mean, yeah, I think so. I didn't feel like there was any connection. You know, with some characters you read about or you watch their romances and you, like, for me anyway, like you just feel it. Like you just feel that connection or you see it. And I have never felt that with those two. It just seems very one-dimensional and not I don't feel any connection with them.
Yeah, I didn't either. And of course, because, you know, for a large part of the beginning of the book, she's passed out. So, you know, there's
yeah, I mean, there's that too. I mean,
so they're not going to have any. So that kind of put their options, you know, limited their options for interaction.
True. It's going okay. It's very different from what I used to do. The schedule's very, I love your mug. Oh, that's
my son made that for me.
So nice.
Yep. So all the other dads out there, I have the I Love Dad mug. I have it now.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah.
Yeah, this was, I don't know if you can see this here. I'll turn it around. So that was 6/2013. He made that for me. This was a Father's Day gift.
So nice.
So I have two of these he made. One was that year, and I have a blue one he made a couple of years later. So these are my coffee mugs.
Nice.
Goodness gracious. Will wonders never cease. I remembered just a stupid story. When I was in 7th grade, we had a class on economics. And it was like basic economics. And not home ec, but just like basic stuff. And one of the things we were learning about was the stock market. And we had to keep track of we had to pick a certain number of stocks and keep track of them. And I remembered at the end of the course, the teacher said, I have 3 different days and I'm going to check your stock prices and they better be right. Otherwise, you're going to lose credit on the project. No. And I had to go to the Queensboro Public Library and look up like all the past, every single day I had to look up the stock prices on microfiche for whatever stocks I had in my portfolio, my made up portfolio. And I just kept thinking, I think about that often, like my kid will have no understanding of what that was about.
Yes.
If you want to know the value of some, a little piece of information like that, you can get it within microseconds. It's not a secret, but I had to physically go down and take out microfiche and put it in the big sliding glass table and look at it. Oh my God.
My gosh. The department I worked in, my last job, we actually had a card catalog for some of the older things we had. Like it was an index of old newspaper articles we had from our local newspaper. And it was so hilarious when parents came in with their kids and the parents would be like, hey, do you know what this is? And they'd be like, no, what's that? This is Google. This was Google when we were kids.
Oh my goodness. The Dewey Decimal System lives on.
Mm-hmm.
Boom diggity, we're done.
Wow, that was
great job, my friend.
Fun. Thanks for having me.
We didn't even get into the whole abortion thing on that book.
We didn't.
But it's okay. We talked about it. I'll stick that in the bonus material. Yeah. It was a great book, but man, oh man, that still got to me.
Yeah, I kind of ignored it, but now that you brought it up, I was glancing over the beginning. I'm like, oh wow, this is
Yeah, there's like a whole thing there. And, the doctor is the one who's pushing for it, right? And she's like really skirting some ethical boundaries, I feel. They're going right up to the line and possibly crossing them. It's not clear cut.
Yeah, I feel like she kind of like had an agenda. And I don't think she was like Dr. Toby Russell. I think that woman was evil. But like I think she kind of had a vendetta towards the Creosians, and that might have been part of it. But I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah, she was very angry at them, so I think that might have been. It might have been
influencing her point of view. Yeah. No, it's possible. It's possible. I mean, it's definitely a bar fight.
Mm-hmm. Very much a bar fight.
As to what happens at that part of the book. Yes. So.